have a good time. All right, everybody, thanks for coming. This is an AES sponsored event for Masters of Mastering here at NAMM. Thanks for coming. We've got a bunch of great guys here with us today. Real privilege to be here with everyone. And Howie Weinberg, Bob Bowden, Peter Dole, and Doug Sachs. Got some real heavy hitters here today. Talk about some great stuff. Appropriate title for, we got the heavyweights of the industry here to talk. So thank you very much, gentlemen, for coming out today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. So we had a little roundabout, a couple times to talk about what's going on, but why don't we start off with just chat about what you guys are really excited about in the world today, as far as music and mastering, and you can just kind of go. We'll hit some Q&A as we get towards the end. We've got a good hour and a half, so let's just jump in and start going. Who would like to? Doug, what are you excited about, man?
No idea.
No idea. All right. Pete, what are you excited about? That's how it's going to be.
Yeah, you bet. Well, first off, I'm going to correct my pronunciation. My name is actually Dell.
Dell, okay.
Like chef's microphone.
I've had that wrong for years.
For those of you out there who know what chefs is. Anyway, one of the things that I'm very thrilled to see, supposedly, but I'm not really certain it's taking fruit yet, is that we're supposedly getting beyond the loudness demand.
Supposedly.
Supposedly.
Yes.
I still think when your client comes in and says, this doesn't have to be a really loud record.
But it does.
They're the ones who want it loud. So we're not really over it yet. But I think people are finally, we have HD tracks and we have some other, high resolution formats that the consumers out there are actually buying. I even have a client who is asking for DSD. Yes. Isn't that amazing?
Yes.
That's direct stream digital for you people who didn't, a lot of those are like 20 years ago technology. And it sounds really good, but like DVD, audio, and SACD, those things, like a part of church. So, they went nowhere. And I'm just thrilled to see that people are starting to care about quality sound. Yeah, it's great. Because heretofore, everybody's been, just using music as something to play out of their iPhone. Well, now, thank God, we have Howie Weinberg's iPhone.
But that's another story. That's another story. That's me for the other.
How you remember my song now?
Well, I try to be. It's not to replace me. It's just to put me in the same room as you, or maybe look up your shoulder, or fix some of your demos that you don't want to have mastered. But that's another issue. But if you want to talk about excited, first of all, congratulations. Everybody's recordings have been getting better. Okay, most of the mixes and recordings I get from independent artists and producers out there right now have been really good. And I get a lot of stuff from a lot of indie engineers that are just starting out in schools that are just never done hit records that are sounding fantastic. So, the equipment has gotten so good and so cheap, so fast, and it's not like the old days where, if you had one piece of gear, you could get much better sounds than somebody else, or you could do some. Right now, the playing field is even, which I like to think is kind of good for the guys who have really good skills. Because the equipment is so good and so cheap. Are we agree on that?
Absolutely.
And the clients' tapes I've been getting have been fantastic, and it really startles me every day to see engineers and producers like some of you guys out here that are just making fantastic recordings. So hats off to you on that.
Yeah, just along those lines, I just had a client who mixed this album in his bedroom, and it's a great band, Belmont Lights out of San Diego. I couldn't believe it. The quality, this kid really knew what he was doing, and he checked it on a lot of different systems, obviously, and didn't over-process it and whatnot. But again, what Pete was saying, I'm excited about these high-res music libraries, HD tracks, and acoustic sounds. I've been doing a bunch of high-res mastering, and it's satisfying for me because I don't have to slam it. It doesn't have to be super loud and compete with, the latest pop hit of the day. Preserve the dynamics, and with the high-res formats, it's more satisfying for me at the end of the day.
Well, just to interject the high-res stuff. you know, when you print the master at, say, 24-bit 96K, you're actually hearing something that is so clear and so close to the original that I really believe, I think the future is going to be eventually where you take your little iPhone out here and be able to download a 9624 track on your iPhone, play it back full resolution on probably decent sounding iPhone converters. And I have to say, that's where the future, I think, is going in terms of music. If it ever get there, if anybody will care. No, that's. You guys care? Would you like to have play 24-bit files or 96K files on your iPhone? Download it right from iTunes?
You probably already can.
What's that?
Probably already can, right?
And I remember hearing from the Apple folks that the real issue was the battery.
Yeah, the battery. That's true.
Pushing around 24-bit files, it was 50% more data.
Well, you have things like DrFord.com, which will give you a 2496 wave. There's certainly some specialty boutique, digital purchasing systems that you can go to. Amazon's certainly been pushing for better encoding rates for MP3s. So it's certainly getting better.
I mean, the high-res stuff I've heard and I've mastered, I've been very satisfied with. Not a lot of people do it because it's expensive and the downloads are expensive and the time and the room it uses up on your computers and everything. But this is still 2014, right?
Sure.
I mean, think of what's going to happen 5 years from today, okay? Not 3 years from today. But that's not even going to be an afterthought. The processing speed and the stuff on your phones are going to be so good that those issues will be gone.
Well, if you look back 10 years ago, for instance, portability and convenience was the big issue.
Oh,
Because right around the time when high-res was really pushing HD tracks, SACD. But now that we've got throughput, we have bandwidth in the infrastructure, in the internet. Now, do you feel that high-res is having a second chance?
Somewhat. I still listen to some of my old cassettes that I made 20 years ago. It sounded pretty good.
Wow. Sherman took a Wayback Machine.
We also mentioned that people are making better recordings. There's better equipment on the market.
The recordings are better. The equipment has gotten very cheap and so good. It's startling. For $5,000, you can get yourself a 48-channel digital studio that just blew away anything 5 years ago, beyond belief in terms of bandwidth and converter speed and all of that. Okay, so we're all on the same playing field now. So really, everybody's out there. They're reading their magazines. They're going online. They're going on the chat sites. They're doing their homework. Okay, and as a result, after they do the homework, the recordings are getting better. I mean, are we agreeing on kids these days are definitely doing their homework?
Yeah.
Doug, any thoughts on that?
I wouldn't want to disappoint anybody by coming here and not have a different view. And I'm trying to figure out what possibly I could come up with that'd be a different view. I just came back from the Consumer Electronics Show in Vegas. And I spoke on behalf of ATC loudspeakers, and it was at the Venetian Hotel, and the girls running around the hotel look better than people I see here at the convention center. But I'm here to report on something that really is part of the cause of high-res being used, and that is the vinyl resurgence, which is dramatically bigger than anyone is reporting. The numbers are much bigger, and the people that are buying it, and people that are buying turntables, are the 18 to 30-year-old. The phonograph record is surviving because of all the things that it can't do. And it went out because you couldn't play it in your car, you couldn't dance to it, you couldn't exercise to it. And it's back. And it's a very meaningful trend. It's not where the industry's going, but it's where young people that listen and listen on loudspeakers, on real loudspeakers are going. And I've gone by a number of the high-end loudspeaker manufacturers that are calling this vinyl resurgence, a renaissance. And I can say that only 2 formats were played throughout the show. And one was high res, that they would get from HD tracks, and the other, in 2014, is vinyl. And the interesting thing is the industry will tell you that nobody wants audio. That's not convenient, it's not easy, and the vinyl is everything wrong.
But just remember one thing, Doug. You cannot steal a vinyl record unless you take it from the store. You can't illegally download one. And
yeah, it has that, which is a bonus of it. And the record companies are putting out vinyl. I cut vinyl. If any of you want vinyl, I'd be happy to take your money. The phenomenon of it is that it's putting a listener back as active. Think about this. You have to decide, I want to listen to music. I want to listen to one specific album. I have to pick it up. It's expensive. It costs between $20 and $30 for a single LP, which is double any download. They have to make a decision. I want to hear this. I have to treat it carefully. I don't want to drop it. And they listen to it on loudspeakers. And I'm constantly, because people that know me know I'm a mastering engineer, I'll go to a restaurant and someone I know will be there with their daughter or their son. And they say, oh yeah, I love vinyl. What do you like about vinyl? I've had all types of stories. I had one guy say, I everything only on vinyl. I said, do you like it?
you and I are from the same era where when I started recording, basically all I did was vinyl cutting. There was cassettes, and they sound like crap. There was nothing but half a quarter-inch 15 IBS tape and vinyl mastering and some cassette mastering. This is like I started about 8 years before CDs were even. We heard about it, but digital was something that something down the line, 10 years from now. So the person who's actually like myself and Doug who's grown up, really making mastering, using your ears for making something sound really good on a crappy piece of vinyl. And when the last time I saw people, when vinyl kind of died a bit out in the late 90s, early 2000s, it kind of died out. I said, God bless, I never see a vinyl record as long as I live, because I don't know if you know, when you master the vinyl record, it all, from the old days, it's not like it is now where you take one file, you push play, and it fits on them. In my days when I was cutting vinyl, you'd have to do like a 40-minute remix. You'd have to change settings in each one, and there was no such thing as digital automation, and every generation made a huge difference. So the vinyl these days and the vinyl in the old days are a completely different medium, but it's just a beautiful thing that some kind of technology is not just fallen, died out and you'll never see it again. Because I myself am completely amazed vinyl records are selling as well as they are. Are we agree on that?
I'm absolutely amazed. And since I cut vinyl, I'm pleased. But I'd like to finish a couple of points that really delineate vinyl from the listening experience. Like I said, one guy, buy everything in vinyl. I said, what do you like? Oh, I don't play it. I just like to collect them. I have, but the main difference that people say, and they'll say, I don't know what it is, but I get more into the music. Well, maybe because you're not doing 3 other things and you're not listening on the little speakers on your PC or something. But it's a very positive thing. And the speaker manufacturers, I'm not talking about $100 speakers. I'm talking about $3, $4, $5, $6,000 speakers are seeing a resurgence, and they say it's due to people listening and certainly the high res. But if you look at the numbers of high-res downloads, and you look at the number of LPs being purchased, the LP is leading the return, and it's a return of somebody getting involved in music. Now, and this will be controversial to all of you guys, but I think music is too cheap. And it's too available. And it's everywhere. The trick is not how to get music. The trick is trying to get music out of your life. Try to go to a restaurant without music playing. Try to get in an elevator without music playing. And I hate it because a mastering engineer, and that's us guys, music is to be listened to. And
so right. But you know, as a mastering engineer also, the high-res stuff kind of shows off your work. You know, if you do some really, really nice work, you know, the high-res stuff will show it off really nicely. And reverse that, years ago, the vinyl stuff used to show off the worst stuff about your work, you know. There'd be ticks and pops and pre-echoes, and you have to make the record, you have to take less bottom off, you'd have to make sure the bottom's centered rather than stereo. You'd have to do so many tweaks to get a piece of vinyl to sound right. After a while, it wasn't showing off the work, the client's work or the mastering engineer's work. So we agree on that. But the high-res stuff, which I think is the future of our business, is showing off everybody's work. And just to, you know, as a addendum to that, it also shows off your mistakes. So you got to be very careful here because I can't tell you. I mean, these guys will probably agree with me. How many records I've gotten? Oh, you know, almost every other record. The client kind of has some kind of distortion on their tapes or some kind of problems that they think is fine. All of a sudden it gets mastered and everything just sounds better, so does their distortion. So I have two guys in my studio just going back and checking clients' files to make sure that I didn't add distortion. Hey, I'm cutting it nicely, a nice dynamic level, I'm mastering it, a nice dynamic level, I'm not over-compressing it, I'm not squashing it, and the client's coming back and saying, well, I hear distortion. So usually about 9 times out of 10, I'm going back to the files and go, well, it's right there, here. And all of a sudden, it becomes magnified. I mean, so in other words, that's become a little bit of an issue where clients are not realizing the noise, you know, when you show something off, you're also showing off a little bit of the mistakes.
You're leading really well into a question I wanted to ask, which
okay.
is, given the amount of the proliferation of all these tools on the market now, that it's constantly getting, you know, we're having more and more and more over the last decade.
Right.
How do you feel about, because I imagine also as business people, you have also had to diversify out of just major labels to also having independent clients.
Completely.
How do you feel about the education level of how much education you're having to do to clients to prep for coming
Well,
in?
you don't want to spend your time educating somebody. You like to think we're professionals, we deal with professionals.
Sure.
Which most people generally are, but you know, if I had to educate everybody on every session I did, exactly what I did, I wouldn't have time to do anything. I'd be working 18 hours a day. You know? So we like to think, we agree on this, and your clients are, you know, if they're happy with what they're giving you, and they're happy when you get back, you know, we don't need to educate them necessarily.
Do you find that you're having to do more education now, less than you were 10 years ago, 5 years ago? How do you...
I think the work speaks for yourself, I think.
Okay.
You know, we agree on that.
I think less. I think less. I mean, I think some of my clients, I'll have them send me a few mixes, you know, for me to check out, you know, before you know the project is over. I can give you feedback as to, you know, the balances of their mixes and whatnot, and how things are stacking up in my room. And that's probably the most useful thing I can do.
Getting more involved up front.
Yeah. I mean, it makes things way easier in the long run. I can't tell you how many times, you know, I've done that, and the project comes back to me, and I virtually cut the thing flat.
That's a good way to go.
And saves money in the long run for the client, and again, with a better product.
Would you suggest reaching out to someone like yourself and saying, hey, check out my mixes before I feel like I'm signed off? That way you can get some feedback beforehand?
Absolutely.
What are your recommendations to, you know, folks?
Well, the recommendation is just, you know, also listen to records that you like the way they sound. You know, you kind of have a reference point of something you really like the way it sounds, okay? And then kind of try to, you know, if it's the same genre of music you're working on, try to kind of accommodate, you know, see how close you can get, okay? And the point, you know, Bob is right about the client. It's very important to keep a good relationship with the client, because obviously when they're happy, you're happy. When they're happy, you get more work out of them, and they keep sending you projects. So we want to keep everybody happy, the clients, the engineers, and producers happy, okay? And the way to do that is, you know, if somebody's stuck, I do this all the time. You know, and most of my clients won't even send me stuff now because it always sounds right. So I just say, why bother anymore, you know? Unless they come up with a mix that they just, you know, 5 people have 5 different opinions on. We want an outside opinion on, or you know, we're not sure if we're going to use these mixes or not. But it's always good idea, you know, to bounce things off of mastering engineers that you think are worthy of it. For example.
Let me ask you guys a question. 15 years ago, there were always mastering tools in your home.
Such as
you have a janitor and a drum. I used to call it mastering and a drum. And as objectively as I can be about it, they're improving and improving and improving. And I get things that come in that they sort of master themselves just to hear it at a master level. And I listen to them, and you don't need, you're fine. Put them up. Do you have any feeling that some of the stuff that they're doing doesn't need our help?
No.
Sure.
There's a
No,
lot.
I know you would say no.
There's a whole backlash going on, and I'm no saint on the compression loudness thing, because 3 years ago, you know, people would be judging the record on just how loud it is, how much loudly you can get out of it, and it came to the point of no return after a while where, you know, you play it and put it, you know, right now, nowadays, the MP3, the iTunes kind of format is really our major, you know, listening format. And high-level stuff does not sound good on MP3s, okay? So we've got to go, I've gone backwards myself by a lot of making records much more dynamic and, you know, and less, you know, less kind of sizzly. But the only reason I think I ever did that in the beginning was only because, say 3 engineers are competing for the same gig. Who are they going to pick? The loudest one, right?
Yes.
So these days, you know, I think clients are more secure on who they're using, so they don't have to send it to 4 different mastering engineers. And whoever comes back like the most outrageous is the one who wins. And I've been on both sides of the coin where I've won a lot of them and I haven't gotten them. And to me, it's kind of it's not a great way to do recording. It's not a great way to master, because you're mastering by fright rather than you know, doing the right thing, so to speak. Will we agree on that?
It's a peer pressure situation.
Kind of. And you know what? Wait, I didn't get the gig because it wasn't loud enough, or I didn't put enough bottom on there. You know, I mean, my answer to all this now is when I get a lot of shootouts, I try to give them as many passes as they'll take. I'll do this, you know, I'll do it in 4 different ways for them if I have to. And this way, if one doesn't work, another one will. But I don't suggest that for, you know, for normal records.
Well, it's great to hear that you're experiencing similar things in regard to like the shift, because I can definitely say, you know, from my end, certainly say a lot of the same stuff. Where it's like, for a few years, the only focus was loudness, and the focus now seems to be much more on fidelity and
as a result, it should be, you know.
Absolutely.
But there is a way. I mean, to make the point again, there's no reason to have nice, loud, clean records. We can do this. This is 2014. We can make beautiful sounding, kind of loud records that are clean. So I think just educating the artists and the consumers to realize that, you know, as a result, when things are louder, things show up a lot. And
taking a quick turn into something just relative to, as you're talking about vinyl and the resurgence. One of the things I've certainly heard of, many people discuss in the audio industry in general, is the frustration of being able to deliver encoded assets from the mastering lab to the digital distribution world. Are you guys doing any custom encoding for
encoding such as
like going to either AAC or MP3, or is all that still being handled by the record label, or do you see?
Pizza record label works for me more than
Yeah, no, I need to. Sorry.
Okay, I usually
I need to prepare almost every project. It's a CD release, it's an HD tracks release, and it's a master for iTunes.
Exactly.
So those 3 facets I do pretty much.
Is anybody out here familiar?
CD files
Yes.
as well? Oh, fantastic.
Yeah. Well, what I'm giving is MFIT compliant WAV files.
Gotcha.
For,
That seems to be the most prevalent out there. I don't, you know what the MFIT WAV files are? They're stuff that really you can kind of, you know, the MFIT thing is quite nice because you can kind of audition what the way, you know, the files,
it's a pretty
your
good tool,
MP3
right?
files are going to sound.
You can run your tools through your files through this tool provided by Apple. You become certified to be a member of their program.
And you do one thing to certify.
You what?
Yeah. I found out how you get certified. You just have to do one job.
Yeah, right. Well, it's Apple. You know, what can I say? They got to make everything exclusive.
But what I'm trying to say with the MFITs are every time I do an MFIT, it's always brought down 2 or 3 dB from what I've done on the CD release. Almost all the time. And I've never had a problem or complaint. Do we agree on that?
My experience is it's about half to 3/4 dB
And
down.
sometimes more or less.
Maybe you're a little louder than me.
But you are making
We're all loud. Doug's the loudest, yeah.
Sometimes a little de-essing is.
Yeah.
That definitely gets
True.
exaggerated in coding, without a
Yeah.
doubt. Yeah, sibilance comes way up with encoding, indeed. Well, that's great. I'm glad to hear that you're able to inject some of that stuff into the channel, and that tool is actually providing.
And actually, you know, I've actually listened back to a lot of these projects. A couple of times I did some really major projects, and you know, I wasn't quite sure if whatever was out there in the iTunes Store was as good as what I heard. So I did a bunch of tests, and I you know, used the Apple lossless and everything, and listened back on my 24-bit files, 44.1 files against what came out there. And I have to say, it was closer than I thought. And the H3 tracks, it's 100% exact. You know, the 96K stuff and even the 44.1 stuff. But the Apple lossless on the iTunes, it's pretty good. You know, Can we agree on that?
Yeah.
Oh, it's gotten a hell of a lot better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think I'm not even sure why Apple doesn't do full resolution. I'm not. Do we have any
It seems
reason?
to be more about streaming is where
I think that's in their future.
What, the full
Because
resolution?
streaming full resolution.
Yes.
If the tenor of this panel is that high res is for the future, which I think we all agree is where it's going, that somewhere like Apple's going to have to give it to you unfettered, unmessed, particularly if HD tracks is supplying it.
But that's still a very small segment of it.
I understand. But you know, even in the heyday, the audio file quote market was always a small segment.
You know, usually, that kind of market I usually bounce off my 13-year-old daughter, who doesn't have no idea. All she wants to do is press a button and download a file from iTunes.
Right.
Happening, you know.
Right.
And she doesn't care. And you know, these are the majority of people that are listening to music these days, that are buying music. They're kids that are under 15 years old. They're really, you know, the fidelity. I asked my daughter, does it sound great? I don't know. I like the song.
But, you know, when I was 15, I was copying a cassette of a cassette of a cassette.
Exactly.
So what has changed? Not much.
No, but
you graduate into fidelity.
But as adults, we really, that's why we always appreciated when the CDs first came out. Adults still were a major buyer, you know, adults say anybody over 35, you know, are the major buyers of CDs because they like the packaging, they like that hard disc, they like, you know, they don't want to push download, they want to have that physical medium. And that's why vinyl, I think, is making such a resurgence. People want that physical medium. They want that big piece of plastic, and it feels good, and it smells good.
Plus, you can't roll a joint on a wave file.
That's right.
That is the quote of this panel right here.
I tried.
You won. What do you mean? You tried. You won.
Are you sure you get
Well, one of the interesting things about the world of digital distro, when you take it in context with the traditional music industry that we've had, is now we have the computer industry as part of the music industry. And it's hard enough to get a standard in any industry. And so compact disc was the next generation standard after cassette and vinyl. But when you look at these computer companies now, if you look at how they do business, everybody wants to own the standard. So yeah, we had MP3 for a while, but then we had M4A, so that Apple could have their own. Then you've got, you know, then there's this whole, we could get
But
down
then
the
these
road.
computer companies actually make music, which is the scary part.
Where I'm driving is, you know, it's to speak to both your point and Doug's point about high res and the future, is personally, would you agree that one of the challenges that we see in the marketplace is not necessarily having a format that we can use, it's having these large computer companies that are basically the gatekeepers of digital distribution, allowing a standard to exist where everybody can use the same format for a player as opposed to the Apple version and the Amazon version and the Windows version and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Do you see that as a stumbling block?
I hate it. I completely hate it. I think Apple, they're a computer company, they're not a music company. They just get a certain cut of the action. They don't know how to produce the records, sign the artist, market it, promote it, you know, take the artist out for dinner. They're basically a computer company that really has an amazing website that knows how to sell music and, you know, and sell music and computers at the same time. So I've always considered Apple more like the organized crime of the computer world. I don't think they're good for it. They're not good for the music business.
Let me record that. Can you repeat that again? Apple is the organized crime of the music computer world.
And it's true because they really are not interested in anything but a name and a file, okay? And a beautiful website, and that's so easy to download music and TV shows and movies. So they developed the most beautiful site. And if you're a kid, you want easy, okay? You want to push it, download, done. 25, 30 seconds later, you got a beautiful song and you're done, you know? And I think it's hurt the industry because it's kind of narrowed the whole spectrum down a bit. You know, it doesn't work as well as the independent artists. It doesn't work well it doesn't. The labels really don't see a lot of revenue anymore like they used to, and as a
So they
result,
feel like artists now.
and the same as artists. And it all filters down to the end.
Finally getting it back, aren't they?
Excuse me?
What was that?
They're finally getting it back, aren't they?
Exactly. They're tasting their own medicine.
Well, the point being is, when there's less money for everything, there's also less money for recording and mastering.
Absolutely.
Okay? And the whole point is, it doesn't have to be that way. It just ended up that way, and it can change. Will we agree on the Apple thing?
Yeah, well, the Apple thing is great. It's ironic is they, 10 years ago, they pretty much saved the music industry because of all the illegal downloading. I worked at Capitol Records. Capitol, amongst other members, were dying on the vine because of illegal downloads, and at that point, there was really no other option for people to get music online, to download. And then iTunes came about, and everyone knows it's, iTunes takes probably 50%, 50 cents on the dollar or whatever.
It's like, I think it's 30 cents on the dollar.
Okay,
That's
yeah,
still a lot.
but still, it's, before it used to be zero,
Exactly.
for these labels and artists, and so yeah, I mean it's a good and
And there's
bad.
also the death of the mom and pop shops where people get together and talk music and talk, hey, hear that record, put that one on, That doesn't mean we can't still have that anymore.
I love that moved online. I love that moved online to.
There's chat rooms and there's chat sites, and you know what? That's fine and dandy, and it works really well. But we have to figure out, what's going to happen. What's going to be in the next 5 years? Is music going to be just totally free, or is it just going to be something where only a few people can afford it, and everybody else, the theft is so large that people can't make records anymore because they're not making any money on it. The ones that make records are the ones that have tours and a lot of merchandise. And so,
guys, I have a different understanding about iTunes than any of the downloads because I see this as positive. First, the numbers of them taking that big a chunk is not true. They don't have to take a big chunk because they have the whole pie.
Okay.
Their pie is enormous, and it's made up of the musical offerings of all the labels and all the independents. It's also a democratic way that a small guy that has something good can get listed. Take a look at your CD days and all of the stores that didn't pay the labels, all of the CDs that came back, the cost of manufacturing the CD, putting it in a box, putting it with stuff, sending it out, and never getting paid, which is really true. My understanding is that if you took $10 for an album as a download, the label would get about 70 cents. And they get it within 1 week. There's no non-collection. It's so good, and the labels aren't bragging about it because they don't want to share it with everybody. But I think it's been an extremely positive happenstance for them because they don't have to go through the merchandising, the wholesale.
There's no actual physical medium.
Exactly.
There's no manufacturing, so
Exactly.
so that means that you don't have to hire manufacturers.
And there's no cost of return.
So, and they get their money. They get their money, even if they don't get selling, if they get 60 cents, they get their money.
Yep.
Now, I can tell you that I hear, do you work, would you say most of your clients are coming up? Are they sending stuff in the mail? Or how are you getting your?
Okay, I mean,
Versus unattended working?
on my end, I mean, this is another thing I was going to bring up about how I think the industry nowadays is so brilliant because, you know, basically you could record a beautiful record in the Philippines, in Japan, in Taiwan, China, everywhere, and you just press the button, you put it on the server, and I get that beautiful 24-bit, 96, 44.1, whatever it is, you know, files back, and I get them in full res, and I send them back full res, and I have to say, it's great. It's probably good for us professionals working every day because, you know, I see so many projects that they come in my inbox every morning that they want to send me files, and I would say at least 50% of my work is out of the country, and it's getting larger and larger because first of all, they pay U.S. dollars. So if you're paying euros, you're already getting a 20% discount. And then, you know, or the rates have gotten lower already, so, you know, I find it just because I'm in America, I'm in California, I'm in the U.S., I'm getting the European clients, number one, because the euros are much more, or any of the Asian money is worth so much more than ours. And it's a good thing because I try to take advantage of it because, you know, you find you're getting a ton of European stuff and Asian stuff, and you never would have seen before in the old days if they had to send you a tape, or actually, you know, deliver your file, you know, file in the 80s, even in the 90s.
Do you have artists that come to your studio a lot?
But to be honest with you, in the last 5 years, the sessions have, I remember in the 80s, almost 90%, 85% of the sessions were attended.
Right.
Okay, and you know, as years in the 90s, they got a little bit less because they would send you stuff when they weren't in the same town as you. And then the 2000s, a little bit less because of the file sharing and internet. And now I find maybe only 20% of my work is attended. And even then they come in and I don't even want them there anymore because I have a way of working without them there and they just slow me down. But obviously, there are clients that really want to be there, and when they're there, I take care of them.
You learned that from Bob Ludwig also. Because Bob, do you remember what he used to have a thing that he charged more
if they were there? Yeah. We all did that for years. We charged higher rates if the clients attended. Now it's just basically one rate. You know?
The trend that I see for artists, not artists that can sell 10 million records because the labels hold on to them, but artists that can sell 100,000, 200,000, they're leaving the labels in droves because they don't need the labels.
That's
They
true.
can use independent distribution. They can get their product online without any expense. They come in and order a high-res master and send it to HD tracks. There's no expense. And so I see the technology from that standpoint being a great boon to the industry and a great boon to the independent artists that don't need a label. Because when I joined the industry, and of course that's when all the cars ran on steam, there was no home recording. I mean, there was no recording in the home. So if you couldn't get a label to sign you and put money into you, you were just screwed.
But doesn't that also come back to overloading of really inexpensive digital equipment, and more than anything else, the recording industry has now become a handful of really big studios, and everything else is a home type studio where they have the same, not the same equipment as the big studios, but a lot of similar type gear, and
you find the Pareto principle in many ways. Like, you know, the 80-20 rule, and now there's X amount of technology.
But what scares you is some of the stuff that comes out of these home studios sounds so good. It's like, okay, well, look, I don't own a big studio. That's why I have what I have now is a more boutique type of small studio where I cater to that. But the big studio system is it will always be around because there's always artists that feel like they want to be in that legendary environment. The Village Studios, the Ocean Ways, East West, those kind of places, and they'll always be around because they can cater to that. But I'm finding in the next 5 years they're not going to be around. I don't think they're going to.
Well, they've been imploding daily, and I don't know if I necessarily like that, but the amazing thing, and maybe you guys have some insight into this, is that if you go into a directory for New York, there are hundreds of mastering rooms. Who's going to these rooms? How many recordings are being made? And of course, I love the ones that we'll do your album for $50 a record, and we'll a lot of things on it. And I send all my stuff there, and pocket the difference.
I don't want to get into it, but that's why I have
the best idea I've heard. And it's it's still January. This is thanks, Doug. I'm taking a vacation. What's the name of that studio?
we have a lot more time left on this.
I want to open up to Q&A in about 15 minutes.
Does anybody have any dying questions they want to just ask us?
Let's jump into some Q&A. Go for it.
Okay, I wanted to get your thoughts on DDP. Are you using it? Is it valuable?
I use it almost every release.
Every record now?
Okay.
Is it is its biggest value getting the master to the client that's far away?
It works.
Yeah.
Is there any other advantage other than?
Well,
DDP?
I think the big advantage is the metadata, all the stuff that makes sure that authors and performers get their monies. All that stuff can be bundled together. And unlike sending, a la carte WAV files to each individual song, saying that one file will have all the spreads and all the pacing and whatnot, that there's crossfades and all this stuff. We've got one thing that if we electronically deliver it to, a plant or an individual or whatever, that the likelihood is that fewer things are going to go wrong.
Yeah,
so it's a really good
or a
thing.
lost master or a
Do you
scratch
know what
master?
DDP means?
I've looked it up, but I can't tell you right now.
It's disk description protocol is what it is.
Oh,
I
okay.
didn't even know it for a while myself. Okay.
The only caveat I can tell you about DDP having, so about 3 years ago, I went to Eclipse Data Technologies in Fremont, California, and they're a glass mastering and manufacturing equipment company. So them and Doug Carson's associates are the two companies that make the big manufacturing equipment. We took DDP exports from every DAW on the market to see, because CD text is not a part of the Redbook standard, it is an extension of that standard. So all of these different DDP creating applications write the CD text file differently. So we wanted to find out if everyone was compatible with these two systems, given the export. It turned out that 70% of the clients were compatible. So depending on your system, if you're using Soundblade, you're good. If you're using Sequoia, you're good. If you're using Wavelab, you're good. I can't remember the ones that were down, but there were a couple that were actually, the DDP would load, the CD text wouldn't load. So
Doesn't Wavelab require an extra plugin?
Yes,
Yeah, I think it does.
it's an add-on.
Most of them.
It's fairly expensive.
The high-end guys, the really expensive ones, come with PVP embedded in it. The other guys, you have to purchase it because it is a.
But that's not something for you to worry about. That's on our end.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but it does work.
Anything else? Any
It's
other?
proven to be very successful, yes.
Can we talk about mono for a second? I know
Mono?
as a mixing guy, you know, you got all your little mono sum button and you gotta check everything in mono and it's a wonderful tool.
Who said you have to check everything?
Yeah.
We don't have to check everything, but you know, you check everything in mono because you're a good mixing engineer and you do that and you deliver your file. How much are you guys doing anything in mono? Do you see, is this still,
I mean, as a quality control thing?
yeah, I mean, how much do you guys do anything in
Oh,
mono?
well, I don't know about you, if you can hear stuff that's out of phase, you know, like especially prevalent is, you know, when somebody makes a double guitar bed, you know, like super wide, but in mono, it's 100% gone.
Yeah, it's been good for checking phase, very good for phase. And good for, you know, if you had a tape machine, it's good for checking azimuth.
But musically, some people do when they're mixing, they artificially make stuff super wide. I had a gospel record where whoever it was mixed the choir, which is a featured thing, all reason to buy a darn record. It was out of phase. So you put it in mono, there, gone. It's the metal mix. What are you doing?
But it's funny you say that because,
Now, what, did you contact them? Did you say you're in trouble, this goes on FM?
God is going to be very No, but seriously.
it's funny you say that only because,
Well, what ended up, one second now, what ended up happening? Did they recall the mix? Did they change it? Did they fix it? What happened?
No, I don't recall what they were able to do, but, you know, we did raise our hands and, you know,
Okay.
can't answer.
Got it to a happy place.
So there's nothing you can't do anything about that. It
No.
has to go back
So,
and.
I don't want to open up that door about standards, but if we had the individual elements a la carte, then maybe. But when a composite mix with something in there that's out of phase 180 degrees, you're hosed.
There is.
Anybody else with
If
any?
they couldn't remix it and they suddenly became concerned that if it was playing on the old FM tuner, that there would be no flyer. That can be fixed in the hospital. And you can download it, and it's essentially a quadrant through split, which is what the CFT was. And it'll sound different, but nothing will cancel out.
I don't want to completely annoy somebody to death, but a quick email of what you're looking for would help.
Yeah, communication is really important.
Communication is very important.
But obviously with the time zone difference, email is way more likely to be able to reach somebody than a phone call.
Skype has made it a lot easier. What are you guys doing Skype now?
A little bit, but I've always found the clients that really express, like, have a direction and know exactly where they're going are the ones I like the best because there's no gray area. You're not guessing what they're looking for. So if you're an artist out there that wants something there, you know, you want something specific to sound specifically, just, hey, don't be afraid to ask, you know? Don't ask, you don't get.
And the second question is, are there any, you know, a lot of engineers like me, you know, we master half the stuff because our clients can afford it.
Okay.
And so, are there any new digital stuff that's exciting you, that you use, that you like, or are you simply using slate stuff when no one's looking, you know?
You know what? I have a mastering processor, but I'm branded, but it's iOS. It's not, it can be used, you know, for certain, it's not meant, you know, to replace a mastering engineer. But like I said, everything is all about cost, okay? If you can't afford to hire a real engineer like everybody on this panel, then, well, you know, there are ways, not just my processor, but other ones, that they're very low cost, that you can get good results, but you have to know what you're doing, okay? You have to have some knowledge, unless they have great presets.
Yeah, I was just asking whether there are any brands or any plugins that are, you know, that you feel excited by.
It's like $1 million question right there.
Yeah, it is.
All right, I'll give you one. UA plugins are great.
Yeah.
UA is fantastic.
Thank you. And I should.
That's my one tip.
Okay.
They make
And
great
digital side, I
stuff.
have to agree.
Are you talking about the massive passive or?
I'm sorry?
I don't know the massive
The whole
passive.
suite.
The massive passive plugin
Yeah.
in UA?
Yeah, specifically.
That's good.
Yeah,
that's good.
Anytime you get the really good
To be honest, still my mastering chain is probably 85% analog.
Yeah,
So,
same, I think everybody on this panel will agree that, you know, the
yeah.
analog is the way to go.
Plugins just help with workflow and
Fill the gaps.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, they're
I mean,
problem
it's-
solvers. Yeah, they're problem solvers.
Absolutely.
And I gotta say, plugins these days have gotten fantastic, and,
Yeah.
you know, more and more as time goes by, I'm using more plugins, and I don't look back.
Especially with, you know, if we get a mix that was probably a little too hot, but there's no time to remix it. Get one with a low level, that's when plugins really come in handy, because if I'm gonna run that hot mix through my analog chain, pretty much I'm gonna crash my A to D converters right off the bat, so I need to keep it digital. So that's where.
Well, that's another very good point he makes, okay? It's never good to overload those files you give us, okay? And there is nothing to gain by it. We can overload them better than you can, okay? All right? And, like,
Reminds me of one of my famous
Do you
things.
find a lot of people that bring
Exactly.
you, compression and?
a lot of times I work with some very famous engineers, producers, and they basically, artists have pushed them into printing their mixes super hot with a lot of compression. And those are the projects I usually have to, like as Robin said, stay off the analog domain. It crunches your compressors, it collapses your stereo. If you do everything digitally, it will translate much better.
Can you not just trim
But
it?
I don't like it. I don't think it sounds as good.
It doesn't really work to turn the gain down.
Yes.
No, because it's already pushed.
Yeah.
So it just doesn't work too well.
Chris, that's very nice.
Hey, let's get over here.
I just wanted to put a bit there, we're doing a panel tomorrow at 2 o'clock about learning to master and also mastering for online platforms to address a couple of these questions. So I just want to issue an invitation.
Yeah, we'll be there.
Questions are right there.
Yes, thank you. Are you gentlemen seeing surround sound projects, surround music, or did it sort of peak and start fading away about a decade ago?
Great question. Doug, how about you think?
It's the, you know, you asked earlier, what would I like to see? There's people working on their working name is Pure Audio Blu-ray. And it is potentially the most exciting thing I've seen. It is surround, and it's 6 channels of 9624 non-compressed, plus 2 channels of 192 for stereo in sync. And what's really exciting about it is they have done all of the groundwork that you just put it in your player, no video screen, nothing. You press the button and you have surround, you press another button, and in sync you have the 2 channel. And I was one that did participate in that misguided attempt to go to surround and have 2 non-compatible systems. In other words, you know, we have a new car, this runs on gas, this one runs on coal, and we can't get it going. And you know, Sony never backed their own format, which is the DFB format. It was amazing. It was, I won't use the word, but it was a cluster something. And this Blu-ray, there's something like 50 million Blu-ray players. And you put this disc in any Blu-ray player, and you get surround. Now, don't give me, yeah, but it won't be balanced and the rear surround thing. You get a size. And I went kicking and screaming in the surround, and I became a believer if it's used correctly. And the strange way is that the only surround that we do regularly is a concert or something, which is really such a poor use of it, because if the band in front, the music should come from the front and you're photographing it, but people, good engineers that have mixed in surround, show me the virtues of it. You were talking about the choir that went out of phase. I did a Lionel Richie album, which I'm going to get and put into Blu-ray that you can just play at home. I'm going to get it from the label. It was mixed by Al Schmidt, and they had this Lionel Richie thing, very satisfying. Some of the pads came from the back of electricity, And at the end of this thing, as it builds up and you know, everyone goes on top of each other, a choir came in behind you, like you were in church, with a place to go for that extra energy. It was terrific, and it's emotionally terrific.
Do you get clients asking you to mix and surround? Or?
Well, I dabble in it because it's fun. But I'm curious if you have clients that want you to do it.
I do very few. I do them 2 or 3 a year, if that many. I think the surround, you know, the surround is in addition to other things, you know, usually with projects. There's always there's always stereo versions of DVDs and the surround DVDs and there's audio. So the surround is usually just an add-on to a big package. Can we agree on that?
Well, I'm hoping that it could be something that's 2-channel would be an add-on.
Yeah.
For the future. I've never understood the industry having no interest in it, because if you could launch it, if you would get the artists to do it and they love it, their entire catalog could be redone.
Yeah, it was great. I'm a big fan.
Surround is a lot of fun. I have to say, it's a terrific. If you have the right speaker set up in the right environment, it is fantastic.
Well, don't you feel that the timing of what happened in technology was really a big part? Because, I mean, surround and multi-channel was coming up, and then the whole MP3 thing happened. It was convenience over quality and all that.
No, I'll tell you what I think, really. I think if the whole industry went on the SACD, which is a growing format now, and it's one reason why there's DSD now, and people are asking for DSD. If they would have gone on to that format, which also had a CD layer,
True.
I think, and if you would promote it, you would get the hottest group you can name, and you say, okay, you can buy it tomorrow in surround, and you can buy it in 6 weeks on CD.
Gotcha.
It was so easy to market,
Creative.
but they couldn't have killed it worse.
Yeah, I agree with Doug. The SACD format I thought was the best thing ever happened to music. I mean, and it's 16-bit, and you can play it on a regular DVD. Most of the players are multi-format players, and I have a handful of SACDs that I think are the best sounding records I have ever listened to. And you know what? Sony just pulled the plug on it one day and said, you know what? There's no money in there for us. We're just, you know, even though it was the best technology and the best way to sell music, they just said, fuck it, we're done. And it's true. And you can't, it's very hard to get an SACD anymore. And some of those are the best sounding records you'll ever hear.
They're coming more, because I'm doing, on a lot of stuff, I'm doing DSD streams.
Yeah.
And only recently has DSD been streaming.
Right.
And I think they could have launched it. I think we could have been working in surround, and the entire catalog. You go through the whole Chicago Railroad, you name it. This stuff is designed, done by a good engineer, done musically. But you know, the engineers, we haven't talked about engineers, but they're the key. They're the key. I mean, a great engineer can make it happen, and you give the same files, and I'm sure you've heard it, guys, where something comes in and the music is not being presented, and it's sort of trying to attain mediocrity. And they'll go, I've had guys come up and I said, you don't need mastering, you need an engineer.
Yeah.
And let me recommend a couple of very cost-effective engineers that can go through your files and make this happen. And sometimes the difference is night and day.
Absolutely.
So there's a tendency to say, well, I got this preamp and I got this microphone and I ran it through the amplifier and it's the best you can get. Yeah, but you don't know what you're doing.
But they told me that amplifier was the best.
Right. So engineers, and you know, the most challenged people in the industry are the independent engineers that no one can afford and no one will pay for.
Yeah, we all deal with them, yeah, and he's absolutely correct on that, and more than anything else, especially those well-known independent engineers, I find there's no challenge mastering this stuff. It just it comes in almost pre-mastered. It comes in, it's loud. You know, I have a spectrum analyzer, and almost the spectrum just looks perfect. You know, so it takes a little bit of fun out of the thing.
Well, it's good that we're asking more often for people like, okay, a question-answer discovery of what's happening on the master bus.
Yeah.
Can we get a version with all that stuff on? You know, so
Yeah, but see, that's really self-defense for these engineers, because they give them a mix, and the mix should be, how do you like it? Is there enough bass? Is there snare?
But they're also dealing with
Punch
the
enough? They say, I can't judge it. It's tend to be quieter than the CD I put in.
Right.
The golden days was that, because it was digital. It gave you a real view of what the console was coming out with, but they couldn't A/B it. They couldn't put it in the car stereo. They had to go home, and then all they'd have to say is, "Yeah, I'm fighting for bass," you know.
Yeah, it's perfect. Interesting. And any question?
Yes.
Go for it.
High-res is changing the industry, and as a result of that, we've got mastering engineers from big companies and independents. I'd like to know how it's changing the flow itself. Are we looking at doing all back catalog things, or individual artists and groups coming to you? And then after you do the work, you were joking somewhat about how Sony did not stand behind the format or the distribution of the music afterwards. And we're getting all kinds of things like Chesky's HD tracks and high-res from Analog Sounds. How is that going to stand out there? Are there going to be a whole lot of distribution environments or channels for that?
Yes.
So input, output.
Yes.
What's happening?
Now, when you talk about high res, okay, it's still a limited market, okay, that really care about this, okay? It's an audiophile market, and it's older people, again, that have nice computers that can handle high res formats and files, okay? It would be a perfect world where everything is just one format, just, you know, 96, 24, and that's just, you know, but,
I'll give you a different view. If we look at the last 15 years of digital distribution, for instance, you've got a couple of very long-standing spy versus spy feuds. One guy's name was Steve, one guy's name was Bill. You know, you got the white spy and the black spy fighting each other. We've seen the cartoons. That's what's been going on for the last 20 years. Well, one of them's now dead. They can't dig him out of the ground. You know, and the other guy is running a nonprofit, and he's pretty much out of business. My point being, you got two really big computer superpowers that wanted to really crush the other. That's been happening for 20 years. That's pretty much at its end days. If we look ahead, we've got a technological landscape of newer companies actually wanting things to be compatible. So we have the chance of having some format that would be playable on all devices. I think we'll see that in the next 10 years. That's from me looking at it from a technological standpoint.
no, that's in a perfect
But
world.
it's but speaking to your point of input and output, we're going to have to see the sort of falling off of the old Microsoft versus Apple, to say it specifically. That war is dying. It's finally falling away. We see the Android operating system really coming to fruition. A and B, the religious mindset towards operating systems is really starting to fall away with the introduction of Android, just because it's a third. And now people are just like, well, why do I have to pick one when there's a lot of choices on the market? So as that issue goes away, we will probably find a format that will work across all these platforms. High-res is where we're going. The bandwidth is there, so it will happen. It's just a matter of what will be that standard and how can we tap into it.
I didn't pose my question very well then.
Okay.
Yeah,
I was talking about input, old catalogs,
Yes.
independent labels being addressed by independent artists or groups.
Okay.
And then where does it go for sale?
Well, for me,
Yeah.
the HC stuff I do is mainly back catalog stuff, Capitol Records. And, but there's been a couple of newer releases where they wanted me to also prepare HD files.
Now, when you talk AES, you're doing the 96K and not 44.1.
Right, well, actually, it's 192, 24
190,
bit,
yeah.
and 96, 24
Yeah.
bit. We do both. And so, is that pretty much what?
Because to be honest with you, you was going with the.
And HD tracks, I mean, they're just licensing the music from Capitol, you know, or acoustic sound. So it's a win-win for Capitol because they're, you know, I create the files and off it goes.
And not only that, but they hear what he does in perfect resolution, you know?
Yeah.
That's the greatest thing ever. When you hit play, wow, that's exactly what I heard. Okay?
I was going to offer also that I've been hearing, like, I work at Universal, and they're building it into the artist contracts or the producer's contracts, or maybe both. They have to deliver specific 192.24 files or 96.24, whatever it is, so that we have, you know, from day one of the record being completed, we have high resolution things going forward, that we have, you know, ways that we can sell them in different markets, and we don't have to reinvent the wheel. The high-res formats and all that good stuff already exists for delivery up and down and all sorts of spectrum.
Doug, you do a lot of reissues for Pyrex. How do you see this situation?
I didn't know I did that. Serious. No, I'm serious. But older catalog is in a format that's considered high res. In other words, if you say this album done in 1960, a classical album done in 1960, done a lot of 30 IPS half-inch, 3-track I've had. And if you take those, it's also before tape has to be baked.
Correct.
It's a whole other world, you know.
It's a whole other world. And you take this tape, and it's 60 years old, and you take it and you put it on your machine, which is ostensibly a really first-class machine. It plays like a brand new tape. And I'm thinking with the high res and with a limited market, because classical itself is a limited market. You can put this out and stun people. Robert, you're at Capitol. I'm sure you've heard even mono tapes in storage in the 50s. They are mouth floppy.
And not even for the 70s and the 80s, I gotta say, you know.
Frank Sinatra, Come Fly With Me, just did that. The
Yeah.
original stereo. And the tape was the early...
The orange stuff?
Yeah, orange. It's the early end.
It's the real stuff.
201 or
It's
something.
3M is orange.
Yeah,
No,
and
it's one, yeah.
you don't have to bake it.
No,
The only deal is it's incredibly fragile. It just...
it's acetate base.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
exactly.
but supposedly nothing, no one but a paid professional, Robert, is supposed to be having.
Does anybody here know what tape baking actually is?
Put on my white gloves.
Can you explain what tape baking actually is?
Tape baking, near as I know, because in the mid-70s, they outlawed a lubricant for the world to use on tape for all manufacturers. That's Agfa, Baxter, EMI, Scotch, Ampex. And that lubricant was whale oil. And they outlawed it, and the engineers came up with a synthetic oil that they were so excited about. Because the first thing, they could make it, and the second thing, it seemed to be good. But with time, that oil absorbs moisture, and the tape becomes sticky, and it can't be played unless it's dried out. And don't think that if you have a tape and dry it out over a period of 20 or 30 years that it's as good as it was. It isn't. This early tape, the orange tape, is a noisier formula, but it's close to metal tape, and it retains energy better than any of the modern tapes, as far as you put it on and it's mouth dropping. This brings out something for all you guys that are recording engineers and what you're doing. Recording sound is the only discipline I know that old stuff can be better. A tube microphone, a U-47 that Frank Sinatra used, that came out in 1947, incidentally, it's never been better for doing a vocal. And a big tube, Telefunken tube preamp has never been better. And these old tape machines, all tuned on the tape that was available for today, never been better. And that's very frustrating. If you're dedicated to making something, and we all better, oh, wait till you hear this, this is going to be good, and then you go and hear some old tape, and you go, oh, I thought I was good. I don't know anything else. I mean, oh, I got my IBM 1955 computer. No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
Is the sort of prevalence of HD audio continuing to sort of have a little bit of foothold? Do you find with more and more files that you get that are the 24-bit 96 or 192, does it really seem to be much benefit with that? Whereas, is it starting to be?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I beg to differ between the 192 and the 96. I think it's pretty slim what you can hear, but anything from the 44.1 to 96 is a huge difference.
Even more so, 96 even from like the 48 or 88.
Yeah, by a lot.
I think
I didn't believe it until I actually heard it. You know.
Yeah, when you're comparing stereo, for me,
I really, most people I know feel that going from 16 to 24 is the biggest move. I'd rather have a 44.1 24-bit than a 96K 16-bit that was made at 16 bits. Because all that low level, all that resolution of the small components doesn't like it at 16-bit.
The word length gives you a much more description for each sample. Think of that. So, and agreeing with Doug, I find bigger payoff.
The giant file sizes are worth it.
Well, storage is cheap now, man. Yeah, storage is really cheap.
yeah, I'd say like in Pro Tools sessions, I find there's a big advantage with going 32-bit float, 192, if you can do it. There's a much bigger difference than the advantages with 32-bit float with the headroom, which can make your job easier in the mixing. You know, that's all positive stuff.
Well, you know, my feeling is, forget about the bit formats and put your energy into making really good sounding record mixes, and put more energy into mixing correctly, recording correctly. Okay, you know, just all you have to do is push record, and you know something's going to be good there. Okay, so just more the effort should be on recording techniques and your mixing techniques.
We actually have to wrap up because
Anybody with one dying question that you have to ask?
That poor guy over there.
Okay,
he's been waiting.
Go for it.
I just kind of had a lesson learned. I came to NAMM last year and we just finished tracking an album. And I came to the mastering session. I think this gentleman, I was one of the main speakers. And I met a guy at that session who talked to me about, and I started looking at plugins and I started looking at local guys to master it. And then he introduced me to Mr. Sachs. And the best thing I ever did was take my project to a professional. I want to let you know, I appreciate what you guys do. And it's just amazing. It made all the difference.
We're borrowing the drink. I still have my cards up here.
I promise I got a good question.
Me? Thank you everybody for being here. Thank you very much.